Hello guys, welcome to Copverse. So today we are going to solve a question which was asked in Meesho. Before looking into the question, let's see what data we were given. So we were given a table called cinema tickets. So if I run this query, select star from cinema tickets, and this is the output that we get. This table has two columns: seat, which tells you the identifier of the seat, and then occupancy, which tells you whether that particular seat was occupied or not. 1 represents occupied, 0 represents not occupied. Now I've given the create table query and the insert rows query in the description. You can copy it from there and practice at your end. Now let's look into the question. The question says write a SQL query to find all seat ranges where at least 4 consecutive seats are occupied in same row. The output should include the row name, start seat number, end seat number for each row range. So what it is saying is we have to identify the group of seats which are consecutive in nature and which are occupied. For example, if we see this particular seat A1, then this is occupied, and the next seat A2, that is also occupied. These two are consecutive seats and they are occupied. But when you look at A3, it is not occupied. So we don't have like 4 consecutive seats which are occupied here. If I go down, then we can see here B2, B3, B4 and B5. These are 4 consecutive rows, not rows, these are 4 consecutive seats which are occupied. So we have to focus on this group. So this will be the part of our answer. This seat range will be part of our answer. Then if we go down, then B7 to B10. Yeah, these seats are also occupied. 4 consecutive seats are occupied. So this group of seats will be also part of our final answer. And then if we go down, then we can see that C2 to C6, this group is also consists of consecutive seats which are occupied and which is greater than 4. So here we have 5 consecutive seats which are occupied. So basically somehow we have to identify these groups in which the seats are occupied consecutively. If we are able to do that, then we have to just pick the row name, which in this particular case is C, and identify the first seat which is 2 and the last seat which is 6. So in this particular case our output would be something like C, which is the row name, and then 2 is the start seat number, and then 6 is the end seat number, right? Similarly we can do it for other groups. So the goal here is now to tag these groups. For example, if we consider this B2 to B4 or B5, sorry, so this can be called as group 1, and then our next group which is B7 to B10, this can be called as group 2, and this can be called as group 3. So if we are able to tag it, then we can remove the rest of the rows from this table and keep only these groups, and if within each group, then we can perform the minimum and the maximum function to extract the start seat number and the end seat number, right? So now as we have to identify whether the seats are consecutive or not, so we must split this particular seat column into two parts. One is row name and one is seat number, right? Because in the end also we want the output to be in this format, the seat name and then the seat numbers, right? So let's first do a basic cleaning of this table, so that is splitting this particular column into two parts, and then we will see further how we can tag these groups so that we can filter only these groups and exclude the rest of the rows of the table. Okay, so let's start. So let's start with select from cinema tickets, and what do we select? So we have to select basically our seat, but from seat we have to extract something, right? We will use a substring function here, substring, and from seat. So how does substring works is you have to give the expression, you have to give the starting position, and you have to give the length. So starting position will be 1 here, and how many characters do we want to extract? Only 1, that is the row name. So let's call this as row name. Now what we have to extract? We have to extract the seat number. So again for that we will use substring, and then again we have to extract it from seat, right? And what is starting position now? The starting position should be 2, and how many characters do we need to extract? That we don't know, so we will keep it as it is. This means that we will extract all the remaining characters, right, starting from position number 2. So we will call this as what? Seat number. right? We can call this as seat number, but this seat number has to be an integer, so we'll have to also cast this output. So we'll cast it as integer, and so we'll use the cast function here. So cast it as integer, and in the end we can also keep the occupancy column here as it is. Now one more thing is we don't need these rows where occupancy is 0, as we are focused on only rows in this particular table which are occupied, right? So we can also clean this out. We can remove the rows which are not occupied, so we can select only, we can use the where condition here, where occupancy equals 1. This will give us only rows of this table which are occupied. Then we can work on that clean table. So now let's run this. Okay, maybe let's remove the space also. Yeah, now let's run this. Yeah, so now you have a row name column. So you have row A, row B, and similarly row C, and then for each row you have the seat number as well as, right? And only seats which are occupied are now in this output. Great. So what is the next step? So the next step is to keep only those rows in this table which are part of the group in which 4 or more consecutive seats are occupied. For example, this group, right? These 4 rows we have to keep. So how do we do that? So as we were discussing earlier, we have to somehow tag these groups. So we should add some column here which can say that this is group 1, and similarly let's say this is group 2, and so on. So how can we do that? Let's see. For that, we will take help of row number window function here to insert a column in this table which will help us identify these groups. So let me first write that query and then I'll explain how it will help us. Now as we will be using this particular table, so let's enclose it in a CT. So I'll write with seats occupied as select, open the bracket, and then let's close the bracket here. We don't need this occupancy column as it is all 1. We can remove this. So this is what our CT becomes. Now we will use this CT to further write our query. So now we will select from seats occupied. What do we select? We will select the row name, and then we'll select the seat number, and then we will use the row number window function here. We will do it over partition by row name, and then order by seat number. Okay. So now if I run this query, let's see. Okay, let's call it as rn also. Let's call it rn. Yeah. Now if I run this query, let's see what output we get. So we have row name, seat number, and row number. So we focus on these 2 columns, then you will find that the difference between seat number and row number is always a constant if the seats are consecutive in nature. For example, 1 minus 1 is 0 and 2 minus 2 is 0. So these 2 seats are consecutive. Then we have 7 minus 3, which is 4. So because these 2 were consecutive, so the difference was 0. Similarly, if we look at these 4 seats, then we can see that 2 minus 1 is 1, 3 minus 2 is 1, 4 minus 3 is 1, 5 minus 4 is 1. So again, the difference is a constant given the seats are consecutive in nature. So let me bring this column, this difference column, to understand this better. So we'll just replace this column itself with that difference column. So we'll do seat number minus this, and let's call it as diff. So now if again I run this query, yeah, this is the output that we get. You can see both these values are 0, and because these 2 are also consecutive, then these 2 are 4, which are same, basically constant, and again these 4 are same because these rows are consecutive. Sorry, these seats are consecutive. So each of these groups which contain consecutive seats are uniquely identified by this row name and this diff column. So this can be called as B1 group, this can be called as A0 group, this is A4 group, and so on. Now in our final output, we just have to keep the groups where the number of rows in that group are 4 or greater than 4. right? So this is how we will finally arrive at our answer. We will keep only these groups, and within these groups, to identify the start seed number, we will find the minimum of this group, and to find the end seed number, we will just find the maximum seed number in that group, right? So the next step is to run our query on this particular table. So we will put this also in a CT. So we will do here, let's call it as seeds groups as, and then let's close the bracket here. Let's put a comma here, so this will become our second CT. Now what we have to do, we have to just select only those groups where the number of rows are greater than equal to 4, right? Only those groups. So we will write select, from where seeds groups, right? And we'll have to group by what? Group by row name and div column, right? Because these two uniquely identify a group. And but we have to select only those groups which have row count greater than equal to 4. So that's why we'll use having clause here. Having count of, we can, let's say, call row name. We can, within that group, we can count the row name, and we can say it should be greater than equal to 4. So this will only consider those groups where the rows are greater than equal to 4. And then what we have to select in the final output, we needed row name, and then what? We needed the start seed number, right? So within each group, we have to find the minimum seed number. So we can call minimum seed number, and then we can have the maximum seed number. So our minimum seed number will be called as start seed number, and our maximum seed number will be called as end seed number, right? This is what we wanted. So now we can, I think, run this query and we can get the desired output. So let's run this query. Yeah, so here we have the row name B, where the start seed number was 2 and the end seed number was 4. 2, 3, 4, 5. These 4 seats were occupied consecutively. Similarly for row name C, and similarly for row name B also, we had another range which was consecutively occupied. You can sort it by row name also, so that you can get the B row names together. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.